Joe Rogan. Poor guy gets a bunch of
Is he not here?
No, I don't see him here.
No, they're not.
Andrea, you're back. Feel better?
One issue remotely.
Oh, sorry.
I am not.
Maybe we should take him.
Glenn will not be around.
Oh, he said no? Okay.
Oh, well, I haven't heard from him.
But he didn't say yes. John's
I
asking.
don't know, Mark.
Okay, everybody, we'll call this meeting to order at 7 o'clock. We will try and speak up. I know the acoustics are not great. We can start with the Pledge of Allegiance and then we'll go for introductions.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There was a request, and I guess our names are not very legible on camera or anything else, that we go around and introduce ourselves and the town we represent. Can we start with you, Bruce?
Bruce Morton with Wallingford. With Clarendon.
Samantha Green from Shrewsbury.
Took Carol, Kenmac. Adrian Raymond, Shrewsbury.
Bjorn Barrett, Wallingford.
Andrea Hawkins, Clarendon.
Liz Filsko, Wallingford.
Matthew Gotchberg, Clarendon.
Okay.
Can I actually add to that?
Yes.
As a chair, I am the policy chair. And you know if any of the chairs want to introduce themselves in the policy.
Certainly. I'm the Finance Committee Chair.
I am Building and Grounds Chair.
I'm the negotiations chair, although we've not been that active, but we will start up in September. So we will go to approval of agenda. If I could have a motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you. A second? Thank you. Any changes, corrections, additions? No? Then all in favor of approving the agenda as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We will start with public input and announcements. I do have a comment from Gail Gillum that I can read. And I also wanted to start out saying our special ed staff and special ed director had recently gotten a very nice letter from the state that they were 100% in compliance, and they got a letter of commendation from Vermont AOE for their services that they offer to 16 and 21-year-olds as part of that audit situation. And we just wanted to publicly say thank you for all of their hard work. And the other thing I want to say is thank you for everyone for wearing masks. We really appreciate it. It is hopefully going to keep our school open this week. It'll be very nice for everybody. Okay, so I will start with Gail Gillum's comments. Gail Gillum, Clarendon. I won't be attending in person tonight because I will not be forced to wear a mask. It is my decision, not yours, whether I don one or not. They deprive the body of oxygen and apparently raise the CO2 to an unhealthy level under the mask. Having students wear these on the bus in school, home on the bus, could be considered abuse, and you have to wonder how clean they are day to day. Where do the masks get placed when they're taken off for lunch or any of your allowable off-mask times? How many times are they touched by fingers for adjustment? Does each student adult sanitize after each touch? And then she says, number one, state of Vermont verbiage on masks state they should require the wearing of masks. This is not a mandate, which is happening at our district 2 schools, I'm not sure what that means, per superintendent and a board vote, which was not attended by all members. 2, I was able to attend the policy committee meeting on the 17th, so I sent a letter to BJ. She's referring to BJ Barron. I emailed him after the meeting to be sure he received received it, he replied, yes. In looking over the minutes today, none of my suggestions for policy changes were in the minutes, or even a mention that an email came from me. Why not? I know BJ will address this. Will there be some sort of ceremony, moments of silence, etc., for the 20th anniversary of September 11, 2001 during school that week? It would seem appropriate, especially since we just lost 13 brave souls so far. So we're thanking Gail for her comments, and they will be addressed during public comments. And then we start with Mr. Lee. And Mr. Yance will start the timer.
Thank you. Sorry. Well, before you start the timer, Mr. Young, I'm going to ask that we please bow our heads in silence for the brave patriots that sacrificed their lives serving all Americans. America is the best country in the world.
Can you speak up?
These gentlemen respect.
I think people are having trouble hearing you, I'm sorry.
Can you
I
speak up a
can't,
little
this
bit?
mask is killing me. I can't
Okay,
even
well-
hardly read what I'm doing here.
Okay, you,
So if we could just bow our heads in honor of these brave people that defend everyone of every color in America and lost their lives for it. It's sad. So if we could take a minute, bow our heads. Thank you. So, I'm going to start with this because this really irks me. If you feel you can honor the flag of the United States of America, I think it is the adult thing to remove yourself from the room during the pledge. This is a disgrace to our country and a bad example for children attending our schools and others who see these videos at a later date. I'm asking the board to stop the raising of any flag other than those that represent all Americans. It is my understanding that the BLM Marxist flag will be raised on Tuesday, September 7, 2021 at 10:24 a.m. Who will be discussing with our children at this event? There's going to be a discussion. Are we going to have some veterans there? Are we going to have, who's going to be there and tell our kids what's really going on in America? And I would like an answer from somebody for that. It is I am asking this board, and I am requesting an answer. Who would have to ask students what should be done to make sure everyone in our school feels safe? Are you indicating to us that our children are not safe? When will you be releasing the results of the discussion from this flag raising? Are both sides of this issue being presented properly and without bias to our students? I would like to know why the public was not made aware, and I am requesting again that this is stopped in light of what just took place with our patriots. It is a disgrace to Gold Star families that just lost their sons and daughters, patriots not much older than the children that will graduate from this school, to raise a flag representing the Marxist anti-American agenda on our school. Members of this board should be adult enough to understand how disrespectful this is to all veterans, especially those who sacrificed their lives, and to this community and Americans. We did not elect this board to be forced to accept their political agenda. You were elected to implement the best curriculum and policies to educate our children to achieve excellence. Our school is failing miserably. What are we doing to promote our students' success? Until our school appears at the top of the list of successful schools in the state of Vermont, we do not have time to waste on anything but education. This is an opportunity for Mill River to begin the uphill battle of gaining the respect of our community and correcting our failing grades. Mill River should be a center of education, not indoctrination. May God bless America. Thank you.
Ms. Bonavega?
And I remove this to speak, would that be all right? Yes, thank you. Okay, I'm from Timoth, and On behalf of myself, my husband, and the many, many community members who voted against raising the Black Lives Matter flag, I would like to apologize to all of our active military and their families, to all of our veterans, many of whom have lost their lives and their limbs defending our flag. I would like to apologize to them because a majority of people on this board have voted to desecrate our American flag and the flagpole on which it flies. You are putting a hate flag next Tuesday, unless you reconsider, which would be wonderful. You are putting a hate flag on the same pole as our American flag. The Black Lives Matter is the antithesis of the American flag, everything that it stands for. It's the exact opposite. And right now, it's a total insult to every single person that lost their life in Afghanistan, and those who were injured, and their families, and those who are left behind there. There's still people over there. So I ask you to please reconsider taking a vote on this tonight, this evening, because you are desecrating our American flag. That is exactly what you are doing. And I'm ashamed of the people in this room that would vote to do that. Just to appease one single girl. One single girl. Excuse me, I didn't mention her name, although it's right here.
Nonetheless, we are not going to be referring to people's.
Well, how come you referred to her when you did the handout for next Tuesday? You know, when you referred to her, you invited her to come.
This is a board meeting that's publicized and on public television.
Well, this is also publicized, is it not?
What is what publicized? I said, this is a board meeting currently. And,
Right.
and we really are not going to refer to just aren't.
Well, I would just say that when the topic was brought up by somebody to raise two flags at that point, the Black Lives Matter flag and the rainbow flag, or whatever you want to call that, it was immediately voted on with no input at that same exact meeting. So it was appeasing a person. Thank you.
Dr. Bonzinga?
Dr. Bonzinga, Vermont. I don't know the answer to this because I didn't see it. I've been told the flag here at the school is not half-mast, but I don't know that for sure. I hope it was. I'd like to read off the names that we lost last week. Hospital Corpsman Maxton, Lance Corporal Kareem, Lance Corporal Espinoza, Lance Corporal McCollum, Lance Corporal Schmidt, Staff Sergeant Hoover, Corporal Lopez, Corporal Page, Sergeant Rosario, Nicole G. Alberto Sanchez Corporal, Lance Corporal Marola, Staff Sergeant Knaus, Captain Kellyanne, First Lieutenant Alba. This group of individuals lost their life in a bombing in Afghanistan. They represent basically all the different groups of people that we have in America. They died for that flag, and they would have told you so. And that flag is associated with and pulled up with the Black Lives Matter flag. I hope to have mast, not full mast. You will be insulting those people. You will be spitting on their memory, and you should be ashamed. I recommend, in the interest of the protocols that we've seen in Seattle and in Portland and Minneapolis, that we continue with the Black Lives Matter protocols and their basic policies. And when you bring down the flag, the American flag, with the Black Lives Matter flag, I recommend you burn the American flag, just like BLM has been doing all over the country. And you should be ashamed, and you should not fly that flag as you desecrate these soldiers.
Crystal Usher?
Hello, Crystal, Karen. First, I'd like to makes eye contact with the speakers when they're speaking. And a little gesture like that really goes a long ways. It's appreciated and does promote us. I'm not speaking about the flag tonight, although I am a little confused why we've been told repeatedly we can't refer to the individual that requested the flag, which was recorded on the June 16 meeting, which is a public meeting and it's available on to stream. So I'm really confused as to why that's even being said. I'm going to just touch on the fact that the retreat has been on the agenda 7 times over the past 5 months, continues to get canceled. So it's a waste of time, board members' time. You guys could be working on the goals and improving other things. And it seems like if you can't schedule a simple retreat, then it's pretty obvious why we're not making any headway anywhere else. The public has been begging for academic, athletics, inquiries onto why we have the enrollment decline. Just last meeting, we had 2 complaints regarding the grounds here, and being unable to schedule a simple retreat is just ridiculous. So I really hope the board can prioritize and set some goals with deadlines. And as from the public's point of view, we'd really like to see some action, some decision making, and some things to move forward to benefit our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine Billings.
Hi. I just want to say thank you again for continuing to listen to our concerns. It's really wonderful. I first would like to start my comment with the expected answer. It's just a yes or no question of the board. And if the vote needs to be done to answer my questions, please make a motion to answer the question.
Which question?
Well, I want to ask the question, but it's a yes or no question. And I want to know if you can answer the question, because I know we're not.
We have a period of time after public comment to address public comment.
It's a yes or no question. So I'm going to ask it, and then you need a motion, okay? Is teacher in-service training designed and implemented to help the teachers better develop and educate our children? Is that the purpose of in-service teacher training? Is that the purpose of it?
I would say yes.
Okay. We agree, Adrian. Okay. In-service training is designed and implemented to help the teachers better educate and develop children. Therefore, it is rational and reasonable to presume that these topics will matriculate into the classroom and to the students. With that said, and according to a phone call with the Department of Education, any information that becomes part of the student's education becomes public property. This would mean that outright Vermont trainings and without ground trainings will become open to public view. If this is innocent and will only help our children, why hide it from the public, is my question. If Mr. Yost would like to continue on the path of proprietary information, may I suggest that the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism has a full program that is available on their site for grades kindergarten through 12, that is open for all to view. It is free and pro-human education. For edification, pro-human is defined by FAIR as follows: advocating for one human race, universal civil rights and liberties, and compassionate opposition to racism and intolerance rooted in dignity and our common humanity. I took a liberate aid and have attached the 23-page FAIR document that would meet the state equity requirements. Therefore, we ask again to ensure that teachers are being trained from a pro-human standpoint. We request that the following information be supplied to all parents via online. All training material, I already asked for these before, but now I've included Outright Vermont. And with the costs, I'd like to include the salaries, the building expenses, the computers, and we provide food for these trainings, for those happenings. Because I believe it's just through Bell Brown cost that was incurred. We hope the board will ensure that Mr. Young complies with our second request, since there is no plausible reason to deny such information to parents, as per the federal statute I stated last letter. Mr. Young's response also indicated that this does not come out of taxpayer funds, but is funded by grants. However, the time the teachers utilize is 1/2 day per month that we pay for their payroll, benefits, building, and computer uses, and many families have to find additional childcare for their children, etc. I'm sure there's more, but I can't think of them all. I implore this board to critique the equity programs and really look at what is being distributed to the district teachers. Will it further divide or will it create cohesion? We currently see division, and that's all I see in this community. I don't see talking, I don't see proactive, you listen, I listen. Please add this as an agenda item. We want less division and we want to focus on reading, writing, math education. And thank you for your volunteer work. I do appreciate it.
Stephanie Mosier.
Oh, I'm sorry. One other thing. Adrian, I had.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask you.
Thank you.
Did you have your questions included too?
Everything I have.
Okay.
Everything I there.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Hi, Stephanie Moser, town of Clarendon, mother of 4 high school students. Want to start off today by just reinforcing the compliments that were made in the past few board meetings regarding special education. I have had incredible experiences with the staff and their support of one of my children over the last 2 years, and so I definitely know that the special education department is doing amazing work, and I want to publicly share that. I also want to say that I am incredibly disappointed with the high school education. I have offered to have my children go elsewhere, and they have declined because they like their school. However, they will admit, they understand that their education is not what it should be. I'm incredibly disappointed by this. The commitment by some of the teachers, it has not been there over the last couple of years, and the accountability that teachers, the lack of accountability for teachers, and also the lack of accountability by teachers for their students, because it goes both ways, is really astounding. And so I'm concerned about that. So I also do want to echo the fact that there is a lack of enthusiasm for the school. There is a really poor maintenance, and going back to softball season, we didn't even have a scoreboard for the girls softball team, which was an embarrassment. And so there was definite discrepancies between teams and genders. And it's really embarrassing to be part of a school that does not have the pride. I know that word came up quite a bit. So what I would like to know, I've asked this before in community meetings, I'd like to know what is the evaluation process for competency-based curriculum? What has happened in regards to that? I will mention I was on the school board when I did participate in that, approving that. However, I did have hesitancy. I do believe it is negatively affecting our children, and I've asked to have it evaluated because it is merely a subjective grading of our students. And so it sits with the teachers to make a choice about how they feel the student is doing, and not upon real work. I would also like to know how many students have left the district and why. I know there's been a decline. Why have they left? And will the why be addressed?
Yeah.
Are we addressing that? Are we calling out whatever the problem is? And so I want to just end by saying I want to see pride. I was so enthusiastic about our elementary program, and the first couple of years my kids were at Mill River. It was fantastic. So we have slipped, and it's showing in all the testing. It's showing in the kids' knowledge. It's showing in the kids' ability to do certain schoolwork. And so I just want to know what Mill River, what you all are going to do to establish pride and also to reinforce a good education. Thank you.
Stephanie, could you make sure that you submit your questions in writing email is fine. Ashley Moser.
Oh, she's not speaking.
Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that there was no X. Everybody else had one. Art Peterson.
Thank you, Art Peterson, Clarendon. Just a question first, and the previous speaker hit on it. I wonder, what is the enrollment today in the school, 7 through 12? We know that?
That information was provided to you.
Pardon me?
Wasn't that information provided to you?
Last year, but what about this year?
Oh.
813. 813.
And
7
this
through
school?
12.
That's today's number. I'm sorry.
7 through 12.
Sorry, incorrect. This school. Today, enrollment 389.
389.
What was it
Okay.
last year?
All right. Many of the speakers that have already spoken tonight covered what I was going to cover. I would just tell you this. Throughout this country right now, we all know 13 servicemen killed in the line of duty in Afghanistan, trying to get Americans out. Somewhere in this country, there's a coffin draped with American flags, and families will have to accept that folded flag. I think it's folded 13 times. I don't know, is that correct? I think it's 13 times, and presented to a family on behalf of the grateful nation. That same flag represents, the creed that represents that all men are created equal. That flag can be on the flagpole with an unwanted, divisive companion, the Black Lives Matter flag, which has ideologies that are diametrically opposed to what we believe in. It makes sense, and it seems to me that this board ought to, as a minimum, delay placement of that flag on that flagpole until after these people that died for us are buried. At least. We owe them that at least. Thank you.
Art Peterson?
Can I just speak from here? Barb Peterson from Clarendon.
I don't know if it would be picked up for Peg TV, but
Oh, on the TV. Everybody wants to be famous. Everybody wants to be famous. Yeah, today I picked up my granddaughter from running, and I saw that the flag is not at half-mast, which I thought was supposed to be all buildings supposed to be at the half-mast. I don't know if you've got a shortener on it, but it was definitely at the top of that pole. If it's flying at half-mast like it's supposed to be, and then you have the state flag underneath it, you're gonna have the BLM flag dragging on the ground anyway. It's divisive. There's no reason to have it up there. We are paying for the building, not BLM, as I told you before. Will you please pay attention to education? Also, your inclusiveness statement I hear about. It is what color you are, or what sexual proclivity you are, or, you know what, when kids think about what we could do is we could split this all up in little groups. We could say, we accept pimple-faced kids, which is what kids are paying attention to, fat kids, skinny kids, curly-haired kids, big-footed kids, clumsy kids, kids with stutters, or we could be like we have always been, put a big welcome sign out in front of the school, just like our flag unites us. The welcome sign means welcome. You can even put welcome to all, instead of dividing us constantly. Thank you. And please, can we go for a little education? My grandchildren, none of them are in school here. All of them started. We've got 8 less students just because they are not getting an education here, because you're busy fooling around with that flag.
okay, we are done with public comments.
Oh, I have a public comment. Didn't I sign up?
You didn't make an S. I'm sorry. Would you like to speak?
wasn't wearing my glasses.
Sorry. I will put your X in.
Thank you. Hello, Board of Directors. Thank you for supporting all students on this opening day of school. I
I was doing first aid paperwork and noticed a powerful and empowering dress code. Thanks for those changes whenever they happen. I completed emergency information which allowed for all kinds of family structures. Thank you. I noticed gender expansive language from students today. It was honoring, inclusive, and intentional. I benefited from food programs that were at no cost to me, and I was able to work my entire school day because I know my student would be in an engaging, safe, and honoring after-school program. The program is affordable too, and for that, I'm appreciative. Thank you for all the effort that goes into the elementary school transfer program. It's been a big success. Thank you for the summer educational services. The staff who supported students were absolutely amazing. I appreciate what it took to make that happen. Thank you for honoring those who stand for the pledge and those who don't. We all have an important reason for doing what we do. I wanted to thank you all for the emotional labor expended to discuss matters of equity. Community members have been speaking about our BLM flags for so long. The process included pride representation at 1.2, and I'm hopeful that we'll return to supporting the LGBTQ+ families and students soon. As I have said, this process has created engagement with people who used to refuse engagement. We had at one point it started with some homophobic slurs. And since then, the people who have made those statements have now come to a place of saying, let's have a display that represents everyone. That's really important and powerful. It also promotes the impact of ending and addressing racism in our community. This display, I'm hoping, which I think I saw on the agenda as an agenda item, will address honoring contributions of all religions, no religions, all citizen statuses and no citizen status, all skin color, our indigenous community, our signing community, our lesbian, gay, transgender, gender non-conforming, and gender expansive community members, our disability community members, all socioeconomic status identities, all single and multiple language speakers, everyone. This is truly a moment to behold. I look forward to listening to my child talk about inclusive ways that she's learning math, science, writing, reading, world languages, games, PE, and social skills. None of this would have happened if you had all not seen and done this vision and this work 5, 7, 9 years ago whenever this started. So finally, I sent an email to a board member and I asked for some engagement. He had made a statement that he wanted public engagement, but I haven't gotten a response to that email. So I'm hoping that I can get a response to that. I know that it's important to not have performative equity. So when we say we really want equity or inclusion or engagement, I really appreciate that to happen. So thank you for all that you have done on this opening day. Have a great rest of the school year.
Thank you, Ms. Okay, no.
Can I speak real quick? I didn't sign up, but
You weren't on
But neither
the
did
contact
she.
tracing sign in either.
Yeah, I'm just, yeah. Well, I came a little late.
I'll fill the form when we're done.
So I just was thinking along some of the lines of people talking about the performance of athletics and such. Maybe it'd be a good idea to have the athletic director come and speak a little more often and just get an update of what she's thinking of doing with the athletics here and how she's thinking that she could better the program because it's falling apart. And I think that you'll continue to see numbers go up. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. I signed you out now.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, board discussion of public comment.
Two things. Responding to Gail publicly, Gail did send an email with some suggestions to the policy committee, and I did respond to Gail directly on this. Okay. Gail sent an email to me for suggestions for public comment to the policy committee. Her email did get handed out to every member there, including Art, who was very welcomed, was there. I didn't bring up her specific things because a lot of the concerns she brought up, I think Art did when he was talking part of the conversation and other people were part of the conversation. We still have several more meetings that we're going to take working on the policy specifically to address public commentary. So that is open. I just wanted to address that because it was brought up. The other thing that I wanted to brought up as part of the policy, Our flag policy states that any additional flags will be removed for half-mast orders. So if the governor says we should be flying half-mast, any other flag, I don't think the Vermont flag will even be on there, right? Vermont states. So it would be just the American flag and the Vermont flag at a half-mast order. I wanted to make that clear. And the only other thing is, I did have a parent call me who was upset that they weren't able to bring their children to the river for a particular reason. That was one phone call I did get, so it's not.
We can't hear you. What did you just say, please? You had a phone call from
I did
someone?
have one phone call from a parent who was upset because basically they were out of town and weren't able to bring their children to Mill River. So we're getting commentary on both sides. Like you guys have mentioned, leaving, we're also having parents wanting to move in. Comments. I think that's what I had.
Thank you. You said you had something?
Yeah, from the public comments, there were a couple questions about the half-mast status of the flag. Just so that you're aware of the process, we get notified by the state anytime there is a half-mast order that is issued. As soon as we see that notification, we take action in the buildings. This particular most recent half-mast order that you're referring to was ordered to be raised to full staff as of sundown yesterday. I'm sorry, sundown on the 30th of August. So that's the reason why you see the flag at full staff now, is that half-staff order had concluded. Just wanted to be aware of that.
That's going to ask. What are the other comments?
I have one.
Here's your next.
I appreciated the comment in regards to the 20th anniversary of September 11th. And I would, welcome if anyone has information to share. Superintendent again, you have information on what the plans are, or if any of the administrators do. I'm sure the public will have to get suggestions and comments.
Yeah, at this point, with today being the first day of school, I don't have any information on what's being planned. You'll see something, but so as soon as I have information, I will share that.
Thank you. And an age appropriate.
In age appropriate, of course.
You know, we can't hear a word you're saying. Not a word.
Yeah.
Not a word.
I can hear.
When you speak, take the mask down. There's nobody near you. And then, you're going this way.
Thank you. Bruce?
Back in probably April, when I was running for the board, one thing that people kept asking about was why have kids dropped out of school? Where are they going? How many do we have left? And why are they leaving? And I asked if we could form an ad hoc committee in April, I'm sure it was that early, and to find out those questions. How many do we have? Why did those who leave? And I've never heard anything about it. So it's not that the question has not been asked. But I can't form an ad hoc committee. That's all.
Doug, Does anybody else have anything they want to address?
Is anyone going to respond to what Bruce stated?
Thank you.
Not if they haven't raised their hand, they might
what?
not have comments on it.
To what you're mentioning? I mean, why not form a committee? Why is everything so difficult?
We have discussed those items in varying committees, and that has not happened because of various reasons.
That's not helpful. So not helpful.
This is the history of the last 18 months. Thank you.
Also, would be really interested in knowing about all the kids that have stayed or have come to this district. And I know what this really kind of broaches on is if you're saying why some kids left, what is the ability to identify students, even when we try and redact all of that identifier. So that my assumption would be I would rather that the board err on the side of the protection of student identity, but I know that there are a number of students that have come here or have stayed here specifically because of some of the work that is. Thank you.
Madison, is that your daughter next to you?
Yeah.
Would you be willing to tell us how your first day of school was?
It was good.
It was good. Can you come up to the mic and tell us how your first day of school was, please?
She's a minor. I don't think that's legal. She's a minor. She should not be on TV.
I was on it before.
No, this
Yeah,
is
right.
television
All right.
and.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, they
Never mind.
We can't even mention a student's name, you can't have a school.
Yeah, if we can't mention a student being in the building with a flag, we
Can't have a
shouldn't have
presenter.
a student presenter for random reasons.
Right?
Okay.
Thank
Thank you very much.
I'm running this meeting.
No, you're not.
Yes, I am, and I'm
Poorly.
not taking your comments right now. Thank you. I think we're moving on. Thank you.
Before you move, can we just find out what Dave said about
Yes, you can.
September 11th, because we couldn't hear a word that was said.
Sure, and sorry, it's probably from having my head turned. So, today being the first day of school, I do not have details in hand for what our individual 5 schools have planned for 10 days out. However, I'm confident that our schools will be recognizing the importance of September 11th in age-appropriate ways. But I do have that information. I will certainly make it available so that people know. But I'd also expect that principals in their own right will communicate to their own school communities about whatever may be going on.
Okay, one other question about the flag. Was the flag flown at half-mast?
Yes, sir.
How long?
Gary, do you recall the length of the half-mast order most
5
recently?
days.
Was it?
It was, just a second, I got it right here. It was from the 26th of August through the 30th of August.
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much.
Could I just ask what the numbers were last year? It was 389, the enrollment is today. What was it a year ago, please? Do you know?
399. 10
399,
students
and
higher.
the year before that?
I don't have that in front of me
That
in
would
terms
be-
of this particular building. I will share some numbers in just a little bit as a part of my update. Just comparing total numbers of students in the district across a few years, but I don't have school by school immediately available.
Thank you.
In April, you told me it was 392.
Yeah, it was 399 ultimately.
Okay.
I think I acknowledged this during the time of the comments, but for the folks at home,
Take your mask down, please. We really can't hear anything but.
I don't feel comfortable taking my mask off right now.
Could you
but
come
I'm happy-
forward then?
I'm happy to project or come forward.
Project, that'd be perfect.
But I would follow the rules of the board.
Project, that's good.
Would you prefer for me to go forward, or can people hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to thank Crystal for the compliment. Thank you. And thank you all for coming to speak and for wearing your masks tonight.
We are going to move on to approval of minutes from 8/18/2021. May I have a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Asha. Second, thank you, Liz. Are there any changes, additions, deletions to the minutes as presented?
Mark said I was able to turn my telephone back on.
Oh, you thought it was on, sorry.
Yes, sorry, that's right, yeah, sorry.
Thanks, Sam.
I was marked as having attended my telephone, but I did not make it.
Are there any other changes or additions, deletions? Hearing none. All in favor of adopting the minutes with that single change, please say aye.
Aye.
Any negative? Okay, just straight to that. Any abstentions? That's, and that. Thank you. We have a COVID status update. Dave, that's you.
Yes, thank you. So just, if you recall, part of the decision we made at the last meeting, you asked for just some updates in terms of the lay of the land. First, to respond to some questions about student enrollment, just to give you a sense. We had 813 students walk through our doors today for the first day of school. I was able to be in all 5 schools and saw exactly what you'd expect. The elementary schools, I was there shortly after student arrival or during student arrival, and we saw kids and parents excited, people settling into their routines, and school got back to the business of school. In this building, I was more around during the lunch times, et cetera. You can imagine middle school lunch takes a little bit of getting used to, but again, the systems were operating and people were where they needed to be, doing what they needed to do. So really positive, nice to be back in that with them. For some comparisons for you, just in terms of numbers, now keep in mind last year was a COVID year, but just to give you enrollment comparisons, fiscal year 19, which would have been the 18-19 school year, our total enrollment was 905 students in the district, 905. The next year, 19-20, was 870. Last year, 2021, that number was down to 799. And we have seen a slight increase this year to 813 as of the first day of school. It is still a volatile time. For example, speaking with Tyler Wiedemann, the principal here at Mill River today, talked about a couple students disenrolled today, a couple students came in and enrolled. So there's kind of an in and out reality that goes with, oh wait, the school year is starting. So I just want you to be tuned into that. In terms of statewide, it's worth you knowing that based on what I was told by the Secretary of Education, all school districts in the state have some form of mask mandate with one exception. That one exception is Canaan, up in the northeast corner of the Northeast Kingdom, where that board voted to oppose masking in their schools. All other school districts in Vermont do have masks in schools, either as we do, which was we will have universal masking until all students are eligible, or some people took the governor's recommendation of first 10 days and then see where your vaccination rates are with your students. Related to that, I wanted to let you know that we finally have some clarity from the state. It's not clarity we're excited about, but we have some clarity about that vaccine status process, how you find out student vaccination status, and the simple answer is schools are going to have to ask families about that status and get that verification from families. We were hoping there is a state vaccine registry that the Department of Health maintains. The easy path would have been for schools, or school nurses in particular, to be able to utilize that to find that data. But you could also imagine, just to protect other information, they don't want to open that wide open to people looking specifically for that. So that will be an ask and receive of information process when the time comes for that. I also want you to know that there is a concept of surveillance testing, which sounds really scary and intimidating. Basically, it means COVID testing that the state provides. We are taking the approach of letting that system get started across the state to see how it goes, and then we plan to opt in if everything is going well. What we saw with that process was many districts jumped on and were told you'll begin in October or so, and they went through 10, 15 hours of training and found out that the process was going to be incredibly cumbersome. This is for testing of students and staff for COVID on a weekly basis. Due to the cumbersome nature of that process, you're seeing a lot of districts saying, hold on, we're just going to wait and see how this goes. And our conversations with Brian and I and with our health professionals, that was the agreement we came to as well. We're going to wait and see how this goes. And once the kinks are ironed out, we'll have a window to opt in. So there is a strong possibility of that down the road, but we haven't jumped into the testing party quite yet. Just want you to be aware of that. It's worth you knowing that contact tracing will still be a reality, and it will look a lot like it did last school year for any of you who experienced that last school year. The good news is our administrators and our health staff are very well trained and experienced in that process. The bad news is the experience in the northern half of the state, which largely started school last week, has been that COVID cases were popping up all over the place, even in masked environments. So contact tracing is hot and heavy. Classes needing to be sent home, it is a reality. I've even heard of some scenarios where schools have been closed down. So not trying to be doomsdayish, but we talk about it more of when we will have to begin our contact tracing as opposed to if we have to begin our contact tracing. So we're expecting that to be a reemergence. And finally, I know it's on the agenda if needed. I would request that we have a conversation in executive session later about labor relations agreements as it connects to COVID. So that's a conversation that I'll request when the time comes. Happy to take any questions on that particular part of the
We're just basically going to ask and hope that we get an answer. Is there any proof being required?
We don't know that yet.
Oh.
So once again, the districts that did the 10-day and then we're going to check thing, we're in a better place than that because we don't have the urgency, we've got to figure that all out in 10 days. What we get to do is we get to watch how other people are implementing that. We'll get to see what goes really poorly and what goes really well in terms of the ask. And then, you know, the evidence required, is it just some form of attestation from the parent? What does that look like? It's also worth keeping in mind, like with the other vaccines or the other immunizations that are required for students, the only opt-out option for students for that is a religious exemption. There used to be a philosophical exemption in Vermont, and now it's strictly a religious exemption, so we'll also be waiting to see how that piece plays out overall.
Mr. Lee, do you have a question?
I do. I just wondered, what has happened to the flu? It seems to have flown the coop.
Okay, that's probably not a question that
Well, it
this
is a
board can,
question.
it's
The
not a
question
question
was-
this board can answer.
What has happened to the flu is the question, and the validity of testing. How, I mean, they found problems with testing, so how do we trust what's going on?
Sure.
Yeah, Mr. Lee, it won't surprise you, my response is, we used to have a medical professional on this board, we don't anymore. I know that one just left, but I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not in a place to assess the status of flu or the validity or not validity of testing. What I know in terms of my role is the State Agency of Education has advocated, hey, we've got this testing protocol that you can hop on board with. We have taken the approach of, we're going to wait and see. We're going to wait and see what that process looks like because we don't want to enter into something that will take our eyes off of the important things that we talk about, like learning and making sure that we keep the schools operating and keep them safe. So we're just waiting to see on the testing.
I think that's a great idea.
So I have a question. When it comes down to the point that we ask, you know, schools have to ask the parents, you know, for vaccination of their child and they opt to not tell, that just goes into the data that we just don't know, right?
Great question that I don't know the answer to yet.
Okay.
Don't know.
Because realistically, you may have some parents that say, it's not a required vaccine to enter any school. I don't have to tell you if my child is vaccinated
Yeah,
or not.
and so I guess just plain gaming that out, that was some technical report. Gaming that out, the scenario you could run into is if you had people say, nope, I'm not telling you that, that could get in the way of us reaching the 80% threshold that we would be trying to reach in order to say, okay, no more masks are required. So there's a delicate dance there in terms of.
So we may just have to communicate that a little bit.
You betcha. But again, we're not there yet. We're gonna get to watch some other folks play it out and see where that goes.
Can't answer yes, it's a no.
It's a waiting game.
Exactly. Okay, we have future board meeting format. We should figure out a nice little handout.
I have a quick question.
Yes, Anna?
Once you reach the 80%, does that mean, I know at my son's school, if they reach the 80%, then they don't have to wear masks. Is that the way it'll be here?
We don't have the answer to that yet.
Okay.
Hey, Brian, can I ask a favor? I have a few extra copies of this that I'd be happy to share among the audience.
They don't have a, they're gonna make the kids that haven't been vaccinated wear masks.
That's all I have.
If you don't show proof, you're wearing masks.
You guys got out. That was good.
So this agenda topic really comes as a result of conversations that Brian and I have been having and that we started with Adrian overall. We are not advocating for any specific choice and or any specific path, but we felt it was important to examine the situation that we're experiencing. So here's simply put, here's the situation we're experiencing. We're having meetings in person. I appreciate it. I appreciate seeing everybody in person. I do think it brings a different tone to the conversation. My opinion only, I think our in-person meetings have also revealed in some ways there was some effectiveness of our virtual meetings that we didn't really realize in the moment. And there are some things we actually lost from the virtual world when we come back in person. That's not a judgment, that's just an observation on my part. What becomes challenging about our in-person meetings is a couple things. We hear from the audience on a regular occasion about acoustics, about sound. So that's a dynamic that we have to consider. And there are technology and cost dynamics to that if we're going to pursue solutions. We run into issues when we have board members who seek to participate remotely participate remotely in an in-person meeting. So if I can just play that out for you. At our last meeting, Sam was possibly going to be calling in remotely. We have this phone here. So we can have a board member on speakerphone, and we can navigate that. They could generally hear very well what's going on up here. Might not hear the public speakers, so there would be some dynamics with that. If we get to more than one person wanting to participate remotely, you start getting into things like, okay, are we setting up a laptop at the end of that table and another one at the end of that table? What does the audio look like on both ends of that? There are just logistical challenges that create a less than ideal environment for everyone. Brian and I, and Brian gets the credit for doing the heavy lifting generally, we wanted to just lay out for you, given that dilemma, it seems like we're in a window where board members are going to have intermittent needs to be remote or be here. We wanted to just throw out what the different options for meetings are, so that we can get some direction in terms of where you'd like to go with meetings. Ultimately, it's hard for us to hear, hey, the acoustics in here stink, we need to fix it. But we can't fix it without saying, this is what we want to do, so let's make that happen. So if we get there, we can move on that. If you're of the opinion of, yeah, we get the problem, that solution is not really one we want to pursue, we'd rather go this direction, we just need to know which directions we need to go and which directions we need to be prepared for. If I could just kind of lay out the primary differences for you. The location really is the biggest difference in terms of prep work. So if you think about this location, this is the library during the day. This setup occurs during the after school hours. It's not that complicated of a setup as it currently is, but if you added in more microphone and audio dynamics, there's more that comes into the equation in order to get that completed. When we look at the concept of like a hybrid location, a place where we could readily have board members and public attending an in-person meeting, but we also had a structure that would support people not being there, that's something that could be doable, but the space dynamics would have to be considered. You can see on this document, there's a couple locations that we could maybe use for that. One is room 308, which is actually just kind of right out this direction across the hallway. The other is room 113, which is in the high school wing, bottom floor, down towards the far north exit. So there are some classroom type spaces we could use. The challenge with a hybrid type of meeting environment would be, we'd really need to leave a lot of the setup kind of fixed and not be setting up, tearing down, setting up, tearing down, setting up, tearing down, because we don't have the person power to just be cranking on that every time we get the. So with that, you can kind of see just how we played everything out, what we would see different formats looking like and affecting different aspects of board meetings. And we're just curious and interested in discussion among you about what you think is important, and if there's any direction ultimately the board wants to provide in terms of let's make this happen or let's keep doing what we're doing. We'd really, really appreciate that. So I'll be quiet for a bit.
I was at a Stafford meeting, and they were talking about when they were doing their hybrid classes last year. And one of the things was that they had everybody sign in to a device, including the people that were there. And then they had a whiteboard with everybody's screen on it. I don't know whether there's any possibility that we would be able to do that and have devices for the public to be able to do that if they decided to attend here. Sort of a question for Brian. It was an interesting idea. It was
would need some lead time on 20 or 30 extra devices. I can't guarantee that we'd get those anytime soon. I could look into it, but it might be a month. I mean, we just watched computer orders take 12 months. So
you don't think we could have devices? I mean, people could bring their own devices. Do we have the bandwidth to be able to do that?
That doesn't concern me.
Okay, because if it sounded like if people were here and we had a whiteboard of some sort, we could have everybody that did have a device log in. board members around here could log in.
Only challenge is when you do something like that, if everybody's logging in and
Yeah.
everybody has their mics on, we get chaos. So everybody would have, in this
Oh,
room.
no, it would take some real,
You'd have to have all your microphones on your devices off.
right.
And we'd have one microphone, well, you could turn your, like, mute, unmute like you were in a virtual meeting. So there's some logistics to that, but that could definitely be done.
I mean, I just heard that today, and it was an interesting idea. I don't know how many devices we would necessarily, or whether we would need any, but the public was here and could hear and see the.
Yeah, the challenge then would become if you're public with no devices and they make public comment, your virtual people.
We would have to have a
We'd have to
microphone
find a
for
way
that.
for them to be able to hear. Yeah.
Right. It's an interesting idea. Okay.
Absolutely.
And I'm looking at all these other comments, everybody. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to monopolize it. It was such a cool idea.
So are these proposals for all of us? Like, for example, we all meet remotely? Is that a proposal?
I would say these are not so much proposals as just
Options?
overviews of what our meeting options might be. And bouncing from one to another would be a really difficult process. But we just want to tease out what seems to be the preferred approach in general.
So I will say, I very much like meeting remotely. It just saves me 40 minutes out of my day that I'm not driving here and driving home. And the acoustics in here, like if we go back to watch a meeting, it's really hard to hear us. You can hear people sitting behind William, but it's hard to hear what folks here are saying.
Yeah, I watched the 18th meeting because I wasn't present, and I watched it via YouTube. And it was really hard to hear some of us. Some who have really loud, booming voices you could hear, but then you also hear the feedback a lot more out behind. And that almost gets a little distracting when you're trying to pay attention, like as a board member trying to listen to what happened because you missed the meeting. So, yeah, it was, and I'm with Liz on the remote part of it. My son's at my parents' house right now and keeping them up because then if I'm home, I can maintain what's going on. And I wouldn't have a problem coming and sitting with the public like every so often on a rotating schedule, that we have at least one board member present for, or one or two present, so that somebody is here, you know, with, if, you know, public wants to come in and stuff like that.
Yeah,
But-
that's a great point. I mean, if we did a remote meeting,
And I know,
they're required to have a
was Doug
public
coming in?
location.
Yes, Doug was coming in during the pandemic.
Required to have that. It's also worth pointing out, and I suspect you figured it out, but the YouTube feed, so that iPad back there that you see Brian operating,
Yeah.
that's what the YouTube feed is working off of. So that's why you get sound from the audience caught on that. If
You
go
were
to-
getting it on PEG TV too.
Was it showing up on?
It was a little bit on PEG, a little, like one of them, somebody was clicking a pen in it. So you could hear,
Yeah.
in like one of the first ones or something, but.
Yeah, you can definitely hear that when that happens.
Yeah.
But what William's recording on the PEG TV feed using these mics, so that sounds better than what Brian has in the back. In the back is live right now, or slightly delayed, whereas PEG TV,
Yeah.
posted on it.
Yeah, so I'm kind of piggybacking Liz a little bit. I mean, I wouldn't have a problem going on a rotating schedule of being here for the public if.
I mean, what was our average viewership when we were remote? 'Cause it seemed like you had a lot of people tuned in.
No.
Did you hear that question, Brian?
Yeah, average viewership was a lot higher than now. Now we get 10 people or so watching, where we get like between 30 and 70.
Actually, and come to think of it, someone from the audience had previously brought up an equity issue, you know, for folks who don't have childcare or don't have transportation, you know, that remote option is important for the community.
Gail would have been able to join us today.
Yeah, no, I mean,
She could have called in. She could have, but I don't know.
she wouldn't have been here the whole meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, she could have made her comment.
I just have a couple thoughts. I'll echo what others have said in that certainly for me personally, certainly for me personally, I think that remote would be the easiest option. However, I'm really interested in making sure that we are serving both viewers. Brian, thank you. That was very helpful to hear what viewership has been comparatively, but also to those who are actually attending the meeting. I would maybe, as we move forward and explore things, it might be useful for us also to survey members of the community or to get some sort of community feedback, because I want to make sure that if we do transition back to remote, for example, that we would still be enabling that participation in a way that encourages the public. I'm curious as to if folks have found that there is a benefit to in-person right now, despite, if it's worth it meeting in person, despite, say, the acoustic issues, which I, of course, have been experiencing tonight.
I'm going to jump in here. I do like the remote. I think the collaboration with the community was increased when we did remote. I do not want to give up visiting the schools. As much as I do like the remote, maybe definitely probably move committees back to it if the community wants to do that. But I do want to somehow incorporate visiting the schools. So I don't know if we want to do one remote, one, where we used to visit all the schools. That's something I don't want to give up. And I think we need some exposure to the schools. And if it looks different than a meeting, and maybe it's just community things that we do on a regular basis, I'm okay with that, but I would like to keep it regular. That's my only thing.
Matt, and then I'll let you ask your question.
I prefer in-person meetings, one with 7 kids. I tend to sit next to the water heater on the only laptop we have, so if I have kids that need to do homework, I'm on the laptop. And I also feel that we're held more accountable to the public in person. And I feel like more people are comfortable coming here and really telling us how to do it, which is a good thing. So, that's my opinion.
Mr. Lee, you want to comment?
Yes, I would like to ask, if we have a viewership online, do we know what district those viewers are from? Do we break it down? So we really don't know?
No way to know. They just show up as a number.
That's the problem.
As a viewer.
So I mean, I think it would be normal for that to increase anyhow, for more people to be looking online. We have no idea who's doing it or what.
Well, we had people names on their log.
Some of them.
Some of them. I mean, not all of them.
When people
but yeah.
would come on for public comment and the like, yes. But if you recall,
If they were just watching on YouTube.
that was
yeah.
just on YouTube.
Right.
My reasoning for judging that is how often people reached out to me beforehand. I mean, I used to get several texts from certain people saying, what's the link? I want to watch live.
Right.
Crystal may even been one of them at one point. So my judgment to that is based on feedback I got from the community to me, comments that they saw on the YouTube thing and brought up. I also know it's much easier to hear on there. So, like I said, there's a give and take. I think there was some definite advantage to remote, but I don't want to give up some of the interest.
But hearing, we should be able to attend meetings in public. And if hearing you guys is a problem, there's a solution to every problem. And I mean, I don't know who you talk to for acoustics or doing stuff, but certainly there's got to be somebody who can solve it not too expensively, I guess.
Yes, Mrs. Peterson?
Yes, in the past, they used to have school board meetings either in the gym or in the multi-purpose room, which would have great acoustics because it's always loud in there, and you would be able to hear us. I also am concerned you're spending a lot of time talking about computers and how we're going to talk to each other and keep the public from upsetting us. We're still not talking about education. Please, could we start working on education and your athletics in this school district, the whole district?
Can I add a comment, please? Sure. So I just wanted to say that I actually really enjoy being able to watch remotely, and I think that it would be beneficial to have a hybrid model. I will just state that I believe that our community is so incredibly divided that we really need to work to bring our community together, and that is not going to happen behind a screen. We have to establish that in person, and it is the board's responsibility to work to make that happen. And so I would really hope that you would not abandon an in-person option. Thank you.
Any other board members have any?
I just have a quick question. When you go to a basketball game and stuff, they have a microphone? I didn't know if that was something that would be an option. I mean, there must be microphones here. Could that just be passed around as people speak, or?
Or several of them, if that's several.
Yeah,
The other option is the room, Bjorn, where the policy committee met. Well, I met with you in that room. That's a
very
pretty big
small
room.
Mr.
Well, so what?
Well,
It's small. I mean, you could fit all of you in there, and you could line the walls with chairs. I think would be cozy and a little tight, but you could then, I think you'd hear a lot better.
Or the auditorium.
Yep,
The
we'll discuss
auditorium,
all
it's
the
because
other
it's
choices.
louder.
It just is so hard to hear here. It really makes it tough, so
Why do we
just 2 cents, that's all.
Okay, thank you. The auditorium, it has been used 2 times, and the issue is that there are a lot of performances and things that go on there that sometimes can be problematic, but not a great portion of the time. We may have to look at going back there. It feels weird.
So, I'm hearing mixed themes. Is this a topic that you would like Brian and I to come up with a solution for a specific piece? Is this a topic you want to continue to talk about?
I personally would like to, and you can all come in, I would like to further explore the hybrid model, and I would also like to explore perhaps moving back into the auditorium. Where there are speakers and microphones that are able to be used reasonably easily. Anybody else?
Just to be, if we were to go hybrid, would it be a possibility to just, I'm just trying to think about what DJ said as well about going to each school, like could that be that we still did that, or would that have to be given up if we were to, I mean, in theory, if we had that one person, could that person, whoever's representing the public, could they, or, could the 2 of us come from Shrewsbury, so could we meet from our schools virtually, or is that just logistically not a?
I don't know, something to be looked at. I mean, you could end up with, if you did hybrid, you might have half the board and half the board. As long as there's, you can actually have communication.
Right.
That's not, isn't dragged, with a delay or.
Right, 11 of us on computers versus 2 of us on a.
Right.
Or 3, for the public.
Is everybody in agreement that maybe those 2 options could be further looked at? So a reusable hybrid where you could have maybe the 3 or 4 board members or half the board members who, for whatever reason, can't attend one night. I mean, it is problematic when we only have 6 or 7 people here.
All right, we'll explore options. We'll bring back some proposals for our next meeting.
Okay.
Take it from there. Thank you very much for talking today.
Sounds good. Now we have, the board retreat rescheduling. Does everybody have their schedules? This is getting a little.
I opened it up on the computer and realized it's okay, board meeting.
That's a very wise.
calendar.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Can I just ask, is Gary here?
Yes.
Because I sent him a note to turn off the air, if he would. I don't know if he got it.
That's a circulator, isn't it?
That's our required ventilation.
That's required?
Yeah, I've turned down the
Turn
temperature a
on.
little bit to try to help you out, but we have difficulties with this many people in this space having to maintain a certain volume of fresh air.
I appreciate it.
So I would love to have this rescheduled in September.
Flash, so I'm really sorry.
Thank you for sharing this.
I just was like, I'm really cold. I'm like, I'm not.
Fair enough.
All right.
That's good. That's very good. I think the idea of having it on a Monday night, perhaps.
Can I just say, being a single mom, Monday nights are really hard.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, it has to work
And
for
now that
everybody.
school has started,
Yeah, no, it has to
like
work
I
for
said,
everybody.
my son is at my parents' house and keeping them up because.
Do we want to try and go back to a Saturday morning?
Yes. Can we do like a couple hours on a Saturday morning? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
way easier.
Yeah.
Does the 19th work for people? Or not the 19th? 18th is Shrewsbury, guys. Well, it sounds terrible, but
I mean, we can, there's something a little weird.
I'm not, I mean,
My brain remembers.
yeah, no, it's true. I'm not there. How about the 25th? For 2 hours? It's exactly necessary. Yes, morning of the 25th. I'll reschedule that. Okay. So it's either September 25th or October 2nd.
Tuesday Day has been postponed, if it makes any difference.
When did that happen? To what?
Recently,
Oh, that's
because
it.
of COVID.
Oh, I didn't know that. A notice go out? Or that was just the committee?
I'm
Are you
not
on?
on the committee and I heard, but
Okay. I have been out of touch for a few days, perhaps. So the 18th is back. I won't be there, but you guys could meet, or the 25th.
18th of September?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be at.
I won't be here either.
The 18th is out. Back to the 25th. Can everybody, other than Dave, come to the 25th? Yep.
Yeah, I'm available 25th.
Okay, the morning of the 25th?
At 9 o'clock?
Yes. We will have to, Brian, are you available on the 25th?
I will have to check on that. Weekends, I cannot guarantee at all,
Okay.
unfortunately.
We'll figure it
Yeah.
out internally. Okay, that's fine. Okay, put that on your calendars, please.
I'm sorry, did you say a time?
25th at 9.
What's the location? Here?
Here. Yeah, we're not gonna complicate it any more than we already have. Okay, and then, if that works for everybody, we will go on to committee business, and we have personnel. And I'm not sure, were we going to address those contracts, or are we holding off
Yes, we
until?
usually want to. Do you have that document?
I do not.
Bear with me.
Yep.
We'll have another report.
Okay, can we move on to policy, and we'll get back to personnel?
Very quickly, we're meeting here for board.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, space.
Okay. For policy, I want to start off with approving the warrant policy F9, which is transportation. I have a motion for that.
So,
Move. Any discussion? Okay, all approved? Or everybody, all in
Yes.
favor?
Yes.
yes,
Aye.
yes.
Aye.
Yeah.
Any nays and opposed? Or not opposed? Abstain, thank you. Okay, so that's passed. We had I think a really good policy meeting. So one of our focuses was on the public commentary. Art was able to join us, and as I said before, our committees are a great place to have conversations, and I think he did that. I do not plan to rush that policy, so it will be on the agenda for probably the next few more meetings. Meetings are still the second Tuesday of the month at 5:30. And did you get the agenda I sent out? Cool. So that agenda will be going out to the public soon.
Okay.
And,
Okay, thanks. Okay, personnel can come back.
So Personnel Committee needed to be canceled today due to Len's inability to attend, but he was comfortable with just bringing the recommendations to the board. All of this information has been shared with you previously, so just for the record, I'm sharing it. We are asking for approval of the following in terms of hires. Letter of employment for Carrie Valente, 0.2 FTE reading specialist at Timoth. Letter of employment for Alice Coates Martin, after-school program site director at Shrewsbury. Contract for Carolyn Gregory, 1.0 special education paraeducator here at Mill River. And contract approval for Susanna McDowell, 1.0 FTE general education paraeducator at Shrewsbury. Also requesting approval for coaching positions as shared with the board. There's one for middle school football, elementary soccer, fall, elementary, and middle school cheerleading, and high school football volunteer. So seeking a motion to approve all of those as presented to the board.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Does anybody have any comments? Or, okay, all in favor of those hires, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any nays? Any abstentions? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Was that all that needed to happen?
That is it for personnel.
Okay.
Although the meeting has been rescheduled to the 15th. However, I heard some chatter earlier that a couple people may not be available, so we might be looking at a reschedule on personnel as well.
Okay. Buildings and grounds? Doug, do you have any?
No, we wouldn't normally have a meeting until, usually we had it yesterday, but there's nothing much going on. I had a conversation with Gary that everything is going, really great in this situation. I mean, that we're able to get 10 less roof finished, which is awesome. And that was a big project because of steam and on the side. Other than that, everything's going fine. Next meeting will be, let's see, how much will be the 14th, I believe. So, which is, week and a half, yeah.
Sounds good?
That's good.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, thank you. Community engagement update, I don't know, Maria is not here, whether anybody has anything. Okay, thank you. And finance.
Hey, good evening, everyone. So, bear with me, I have a new computer. Okay, we have the following pay orders and payroll for approval this evening. For payroll, I have a warrant dated August 27th in the amount of $573,117.79. I have a warrant dated August 30th in the amount of $86.04, and a warrant dated September 1st in the amount of $4,702.17, for a total of $577,906. Hold on, I got a match here. Okay, for pay orders from the general fund, I have a pay order in the amount of $288,637.75. Also from the general fund, a pay order in the amount of $5,627.85. From ASP, which is after school program, a pay order in the amount of $1,114.82. From the lunch program, a pay order in the amount of $8,390.12. And lastly, from food service, a pay order in the amount, and this is FY21, in the amount of $24,000, just this last one, $24,262.88, for a grand total of $328,033.42. And I move that we approve and accept the payroll and these pay orders as presented.
So second.
Okay, is there any discussion, Doug, did you review?
No, it's all on flag issues the last 2 or 4 years. everything there is a green flag. There's nothing in there, no red flags, no yellow flags, and it's all green. That's good.
Okay, so all in favor of approving the pay orders, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Doug's getting comical.
Yes, he is. He's taking the place of George. Are there any nays or abstentions? No, okay, thank you.
I would like to just say that, so our next meeting is September 26th at 4:30. And is there anyone on the committee opposed to meeting instead at 5? I will be very hard pressed to be here at 4:30.
27.
Monday, the 27th, thank you. Our next meeting of the Finance Committee is Monday, the 27th at 4:30, and if possible, I can try for 4:30. I can try. I may be late.
I mean, I don't see any reason why we can't. Anybody else who's on the committee?
That works? Okay, all right, so our next meeting will be September 27th at 5 p.m.
Okay, now we are moving on to the outside display proposal. And I think perhaps it's time, if we're going to proceed with this, that we form some kind of a subcommittee. It's a little bit hard to, with other people involved, rather than just the board sort of discussing it every meeting. What do you think?
I'm so sorry, I can hear.
Doug? Doug? We're talking about perhaps forming some kind of a smaller committee to tackle the outside display. Since you're on buildings and grounds, we thought you should be part of the conversation.
The outside display
We were talking about perhaps doing either inside or outside some kind of a display, sort of like what Mr. Peterson suggested. It is. Matt, are you interested in perhaps serving on such?
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other volunteers so that you could perhaps, Sam? Doug, did you say yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, so we have at least 3 people. And Asha. I would sort of leave it to you guys to get together and perhaps talk to Dave to maybe get some faculty interest. Sure. If that's possible. Does that sound good? You guys want to get together and let somebody to sort of be the corraller?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that you volunteering?
Sure, why not? I will chair the outside display committee. Absolutely. So, I mean, I guess we should discuss a little bit what the proposal was.
Well, I think we need to maybe review and maybe decide what this board wants to do and what the school would like to have happen. And, I mean, I think this needs to be a bigger conversation. I mean, we should get some kids involved, some faculty, administrators, yes.
Just as a matter of process, my experience with an ad hoc committee is it always helps if there's a charge from the board. The board saying, this is what we want you to work on. So, yeah, that'd be good help.
So,
there you go, Matt.
Anybody have any comments that they'd like to, a direction or?
You missed it we talked it a lot last meeting. I think you missed it.
Yeah, I had originally asked to have this put on the, on the agenda, not realizing that I wouldn't actually be able to attend the meeting, which kind of probably looked a little bit funny. But, yeah, so I kind of missed the discussion. I haven't had a chance to watch the whole footage, so I'm not really sure where it was left with the board.
I think there was a lot of support for having other locations to have displays of equity.
inclusion and diversity. I mean, so maybe if everybody on the committee would review that conversation. And I think it might be helpful, since I don't know if we can hash out the charge currently, other than to say, please start the process. But maybe if everybody could could think about what their, their ideas were and come to the next meeting, but perhaps you guys have a conversation on where that would be going. Maybe you could.
I would be happy to help, but I think it makes sense that the board have no expectation that I'm driving.
No,
that
absolutely. I
conversation.
said, no, but I'm in the process of being able to get
I will-
faculty, get some
Absolutely. Any heavy lifting.
administrators. I mean, I'm sure the equity committee would be very happy to, and Jody would be the contact for that.
Yes.
So she might be your first stop.
I think I'd like to see something inclusive, but not singling out different groups.
Well, I believe that was kind
No,
of Art's.
absolutely.
I mean, that's what we talked, somebody was talking today. Fat people, skinny people, freckled people, pimply people. We don't just think in one or two groups. But we're trying to be inclusive of everybody without being singular.
I mean, that could go as far as, a contest within the school, and I think this might be a year-long process, working out how exactly it would work out. Yes, sir?
Well, just to be very clear here, and I think I'm hearing you talk about, Matt brought it up, about my proposal at the last 2 meetings ago, I guess it would be now. If that's what you're talking about, I want to make it very clear that my proposal is a compromise. You do not fly the flag, but you do this instead. If you're going to do both, I want no part of it. Okay? If you're going to fly the flag and then be thinking about this, that's not what I said. I specifically said a compromise that in order to stop the divisiveness that you started with this flag business, we create something that everyone can buy into. That was my proposal, just so it's very clear.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Being that apparently there was at least some support of this proposal at the last meeting, that's the kind of idea I'm getting. And that we're just in the process now of putting together some form of ad hoc committee to review this. Would it be inappropriate to ask to delay the September 7th until we can at least have one meeting to decide which direction the board wants us to go, or is it too far along the process to do that?
I don't believe I mean, if you review the minutes and the film of that meeting, there was nobody suggested that.
Okay.
Part of that process.
That was just my.
But, I mean, almost the full board is here, although we're still missing two people.
I mean, Art's made it clear that his proposal was kind of supposed to be a compromise. And I just didn't know if the board wanted to give us a chance to meet once and see what we decide, or if we want to just go ahead with still putting the flag up on the 7th. I mean, I just asking where people stand. So.
I will repeat what I said before. I love the idea of having another location that could house things other than the flag, but it doesn't replace the fact of all the work that we did, the policy and everything else for the flag being flown. That was my thing, and that is slightly different than what Art suggested. So that's where that was what I recommended.
If I could add to that, I spoke up at the last meeting and said that I appreciate the permanent nature of the equity display, whether that's outside or inside the building. And I stressed the fact that the flag is a temporary display. So I support those.
May I comment? I just want to say this is kind of an example of how people feel they're not being heard. Art put together a compromise to the board, but now the board is here and let's do both. It's not hearing what he came up to say, and I think that I'm just pointing this out. I don't really want a response because I know I'm going to get this is the way it is. But people aren't hearing, he came with a compromise, full or this. And now you're taking this compromise and making it something else. And that's what makes people feel like they're not heard.
Yeah.
That's the psychology behind why people feel like they're not heard. And that's all I don't.
Okay, thank you. I will say that we had a discussion at the last meeting.
Yes. But
And-
he ignited your discussion, Adrian.
You took my idea and
Okay,
totally
guys.
perverted it to your own benefit here. I didn't bring it up, so we'd do both. It was a compromise. That means you give something, we give something. Okay, that's what that is. All right. You're wanting to do both, which you're going to do what you're going to do. I guess we can, all we can do is kick and scream over here, but. You're just going about this so totally wrong. That's all I can tell you.
There's a really great program called Braver Angels, and it's about the different sides listening to each other and maybe really hearing, because that just showed me a perfect example of somebody coming to the table and his idea wasn't really heard, what his intent was.
Actually, I just will respond to you without saying, no, we're ignoring it. We did discuss it, and we said specifically, we heard Art's suggestion. We are not willing at the meeting our last meeting, that we were not willing to not fly the flag. We had worked done a tremendous amount of work to develop the policy in response to student and board requests.
The policy doesn't mean that you fly the
Mr.
flag,
Peterson,
Adrian. The
Mr.
policy's a
Peterson, you're
mechanism.
interrupting. Mr.
It's a
Peterson.
mechanism. It doesn't mean you fly the flag. This body has to take the considerations and the risk assessments and put that together and then decide. The policy is immaterial. If anybody had any guts here to tell the kid that flag can't fly, it's too political.
Are you
That
finished?
would have done it and ended
Excuse
it.
me, this is our board meeting, and you are interrupting.
I don't care. I'm a citizen here and a taxpayer, and I'm sick and tired of the way you people conduct business. It's horrendous.
Are we done? Can we move on to something else, please?
No, I still want to say something about this.
Okay, go ahead, Bruce.
Was just said, I don't see how it was a compromised position. And then it's been taken, and we're going to do both now. We said that last week. Somebody goes, that's a good idea, I like that too. I don't see how a display or a flag is going to bring anybody together. I want to see some pride in the school and people welcoming each other. And you see somebody, you can feel it when you get into a school. You can feel the camaraderie. You can feel the love. But we're not feeling that. That's what somebody brought up tonight. It's not here. And putting up a display, you might feel that this is going to do it now. It's not going to do it any more than the flag. It may satisfy your desire to have a display up or a flag up, but we got to get to we're still not talking about education.
Yeah.
But we got to get the spirit in the school. Now, I know how to do that. But it won't be a display that does it.
I'm sorry, that was great.
Are there any other comments?
I have.
Matt, are you going? Okay, 1 minute.
I'm sorry.
We really do need to keep going.
I'm sorry
Yeah.
to disappoint you. I really am. But we just had American lives lost. This is no time to put up a flag on our school that is detrimental to the service those people do to America. This is disgraceful. And you know what? If we have one little puppy that's going to be upset, so be it. We have a country that's upset, and a country that deserves respect from you, from you, from you, from every one of you. And this is a disgrace. And I'm done now. Thank you.
Do we know when the funeral is going to be, the funerals are going to be?
I
When
don't
they're
think
scheduled?
anything's been said.
I'm going to move on to something less contentious. Public comment against board member. Public complaint. I'm not really, I know there was a complaint issued or made by Crystal Usher, specifically about Liz turning her back on a public speaker in her form of, and I won't, you can speak to it yourself, you already have. If there is any interest on the board to further discuss this, we can do that. We have a public complaint.
Do you have a complaint?
I have a statement to read.
Okay, go ahead, Crystal.
Very nervous about doing that, so doing this, so please bear with me. I feel that Liz was repeatedly has behaved poorly and violated ethical policy B3, numbers 1, 2, and 3, as well as the Vermont School Board Association Code of Ethics. And I just want to clarify before I start my statement, my intent is not to speak in regards to the flag or the controversial conversations that have occurred, but in regards to the actions that occurred leading to this complaint. I have not shared my views regarding the controversial topics, and I have no intentions of doing so. Liz, a few weeks ago you read your statement attempting to defend your behavior in regards to turning your chair to Mr. Fillmore. I observed you as being well-educated, articulate, and clearly passionate about what you believe in. While these are all admirable qualities to have, your inability to conduct yourself in a professional and respectful manner far overshadow any representation and opinions you express. On a number of occasions, you have been unable to separate your personal and political views, resulting in disrespectful and unethical behavior. Specific violations, referring to a public member of our community and ethnic minority in slang terms, directly resulting in his children leaving our school district. Referring to another public member of our community as a white supremacist, because his viewpoint differs from yours. This individual, R.M. Majorel, later ran for a seat on the board, as you know, losing by 6 votes, which could have been a direct result of your negative social media comments made by you and another board member. Arn, who does not have a Facebook profile, was unable to defend himself in the same public platform in which you used to bully him. As he has stated, your words could negatively affect his personal life, his children who have now also left the school district, and potentially damage his career. Turning your chair against a public speaker, which you attempted to explain in an email reply to me dated 7/22. You claimed at that time your actions were a result of the speakers going over time, with no other reasons mentioned. You went on to state the exact speaking time in the email of several speakers, and ended, I'll quote, "It is my opinion that to disregard our public comment guidelines is disrespectful of the board chair, the board, and our community, our school community members who adhere to the established meeting norms. I did not observe you timing each speaker. When you turned your chair, you were not aware of the exact length to the second of speakers' times, as your email suggested. Obviously, you made this determination after a review of the meeting minutes. I believe your email reply to me was simply a creative way of attempting to defend your actions. Considering you felt Todd was disrespectful by going over speaking time, I suspect you have now realized your behavior is far more disrespectful, hurtful, and childish than a speaker simply going over time. Does your comment in regards to him being disrespectful of the board chair, the board, and our school community members who adhere to established meeting norms not apply to you? Because when you turned your chair and back to Mr. Fillmore, you were most certainly not adhering to established meeting norms. Eventually, you proceeded to defend your actions, admitting in a long, articulate statement that you found Todd's comments offensive. His statement is his opinion, something he believes in and is passionate about. Had you been speaking in something you were in agreement with, I strongly suspect you would not have behaved so poorly, regardless of the time count. You presented yourself in a childish and disrespectful manner, yet everyone in the room did their best to ignore your actions. The speaker finished his comment and the meeting continued. Todd spoke in regards to events and discussions that occurred at the June 16 public meeting. A recorded meeting available for streaming online, where a young adult made a formal request to raise the flag, the BLM flag. Todd presented himself respectfully, while choosing not to name the young adult who had made the request. What I heard in his comment was his emphasis on what he feels is the divisive nature of the flag and BLM, a comment you took out of context, going on to claim he was disparaging a student. Whether you agree with what a public speaker is stating or not, it is your position to conduct yourself in a professional and respectful manner. You have repeatedly proved this is a challenge for you, and as a result, upset and hurt many members of the community in which you are serving. Ironically, I filed this ethical complaint prior to your most recent insulting behavior at yet another community member and taxpayer. When Anna Majorel asked about your insulting social media comment regarding her husband, while asking you why you never responded to her email in this regards, you became confrontational, rude, and attempted to defend your actions by accusing Anna of stalking a child. Clearly, you are not understanding how the world of social media works. Once something is commented, posted, or shared publicly, as your comment was, anyone can capture that interaction and do with it what they wish. Anna is not actively on Facebook and was not stalking a child. More likely, someone made her or her husband aware of the comments you had made. Regardless of how your comments were discovered, you have no right to speak to a community member in the manner in which you did, throwing insults and continuing to bully the Majorel family. As Adrian stated at last meeting, this is an embarrassment to our community. It certainly is. Your repeated choices and poor representation of our school board needs to stop. Your behavior reflects on the entire board. I have attended 2 varsity preseason soccer games in the past week, both of which your behavior was mentioned by other parents, followed by questions in regard to why such behavior is tolerated by our board. I will now officially ask you to step down from your position. I suspect you are too proud to make that decision and will formally request the board censure you. You are obviously not an appropriate individual to serve on the Community Engagement Committee, and in hopes of regaining your fellow board members and the community's respect, I will ask you to resign from this committee immediately. Sadly, Len has already left the committee as a direct result of your behavior, in which I am not aware of you acknowledging or apologizing for having caused this action. To the board, while I understand this is difficult and uncomfortable, I will remind you the public has not witnessed or heard of continued name-calling or disrespectful behavior from any of you. Please put your personal feelings aside. Consider the district ethical policy as well as the VSBA ethical policy, and hold your fellow board member accountable for continuing to violate policy. I respect each of you as board members, and I expect that same respect from our board members to our community. I thought about Liz's behavior at me. It's bothersome. If my friend, child, or fellow board member was to act in a similar manner as you, it would not be tolerated. I would encourage my friend to behave better or end the friendship. Reprimand my child for bullying and acting inappropriately. And lastly, work with my fellow board members to regain the public's respect to end the poor behavior of an elected member. I realize the discussions that have taken place over the past year are controversial, difficult, and uncomfortable. However, professional and respectful behavior by the board is expected. I personally do not know you, Liz, and I have only made this complaint because I find your behavior extremely inappropriate by an elected official. While violating a policy a number of times, showing no remorse and only attempting to defend your actions. I know our community and our children need to be led by a better example. Regardless of political views, respect should not be a stretch by any member. Thank you.
I will read the board member conflict of interest policy. Members of the board recognize the ethical duty of all public officers to avoid conflicts of interest and to act in an ethical manner. Vermont statutes include a requirement that school boards adopt policies and procedures to avoid the appearance of conflicts of interest. In order to comply with the obligations thus imposed, school board members should observe the following standards. Board members will be familiar with the SBA Code of Ethics and will observe its provisions. Board members will be familiar with and adhere to those provisions of Vermont education laws which define school board powers and govern board member compensation and public bidding processes. A board member will do nothing intended to give the false impression that he or she has the authority to make decisions or take action on behalf of the board or the school administration. A board member will not take any action which is intended to give the impression that he or she would represent special interests or partisan politics for personal gain. 5, the board member will not use his or her position on the board in any manner intended to unfairly promote personal fiduciary interests or the fiduciary interests of family members, friends, or supporters. 6, a board member will not accept anything of value in return for taking particular positions on matters before the board. 7, a board member may not be employed by the school districts during the board member's term of office. 8, a board member will do nothing intended to leave the impression that his or her position on any issue can be influenced by anything other than a fair presentation of all sides of the question. When a board member becomes aware of involvement in a conflict of interest as defined in state law or this policy, he or she will declare the nature and extent of the conflict or appearance of conflict or inclusion. in the board minutes and will abstain from voting and participating in the discussion of the issue giving rise to the conflict. When a conflict of interest claim against a board member is brought to the board in writing and is signed by another board member or the public, and the board member against whom the claim is made does not concur that a conflict in fact exists, the following board procedures will be followed. At the request of the remaining board members or upon order of the chair, the board will hold an informal hearing on the conflict of interest claim, giving both the board member and the person bringing the claim an opportunity to be heard. At the conclusion of the informal hearing, the remaining board members will be determined by majority vote to take one of the following actions. Issue a public finding that the conflict of interest is not supported by the evidence and is therefore dismissed. Issue a public finding that the conflict of interest charge is supported by the evidence and that the board member should disqualify him or herself from voting or otherwise participating in board deliberations or decisions related to that issue as required by Vermont statute. Issue a public finding that the conflict of interest charge is supported by the evidence and in addition to disqualifying him or herself from voting or otherwise participating in the board deliberations or decisions, the board member should be formally censured or subjected to some other action not allowed by law, or such other actions may be allowed by law. And the final choice is take no action. Now you've heard the complaint, which is broadened from the initial complaint, and I don't know if there are any board members that would fulfill the primary requirement that that a board member becomes involved signs on the complaint. Liz, do you want to make a statement?
I do not.
Thank you. You don't have. Is there another board member that would like to make this go further?
What do you need?
Somebody has to sign on to the complaint and say that they are complaining about the same things.
Saying you agree.
I agree.
And we'll move on to the process of deciding what. Liz has already said she has no comment to make. So we have those 4 findings that we can make. I would assume that everybody should look at policy D3. She's just read it.
And also the VSBA specifically states respect peers, constituents, and confidentiality considerations. Maybe we're reading this wrong.
So I'm opening this up for conversation, discussion.
Obviously, this is not a conflict of interest. This is the second time we've had a complaint against a board member since March. And the first one went back to the Vermont, like the first or second thing.
Vermont
Code of Ethics.
The VSBA code of ethics.
Right. It's the Code of Ethics. This has nothing to do with conflict of interest if most of them we're dealing with. So it has to do with Code of Ethics. I don't know. My parents were business people. They treated everybody with respect, even if they were right. They listened to the customers, and they parted friends. And the customers came back. They didn't attack them. So that's what I grew up with. I'm not going to treat anybody out here disrespectful. And I think turning your chair on a citizen who had a valid argument in his mind, I think that was wrong.
Yeah, that night, Liz was sitting next to me. And I thought in my mind that was going a little bit wrong. But I don't know if it was done from a malicious, I don't believe it to be a malicious standpoint it was done. Personally, I think it looked a little silly from my standpoint. Being silly is not something I think should reject anybody from this committee. What I do think will happen if I remember right, Liz was up for re-election this coming year. If the members of the town of Wallingford think it's a problem, the members will speak Elizabeth could be here next time, or she could go on next month. I think it's up to them in this situation more than it would be up to us, from our abilities as a board.
I don't think the board has the authority to kick somebody off the board.
No, nobody, that is not one of the options.
I know, I'm saying,
Yes.
we don't have.
Do you want me to read the four
I think we have
choices again?
We could censure somebody.
Yes. Issue a public finding that the conflict of interest charge is not supported by the evidence and is therefore dismissed, so dismissal. Issue a public finding that the conflict of interest charge is supported by the evidence and that the board, or that the member should disqualify him or herself from voting or otherwise participating in the board deliberations or decision related to that issue as required by Vermont statute. Issue a public finding that the conflict of interest charge is supported by the evidence and in addition to disqualifying him or herself from voting or otherwise participating in board deliberations or decisions, the board member should be formally censured or subjected to such action as may be allowed by law. Obviously, there's no breaking of any law here, so that's not part of that. And then take no action. Doug, I'm interpreting what you said to be take no action. Okay. Are there any other board members that have anything to say? Matt?
Liz chose to turn her back. You know, that's her own decision to make. I understand how it looks bad. I understand the frustration. I mean, I think if I was speaking, I probably would have been offended and upset if somebody had turned their back on me. And I understand that we have a 3-minute time frame for speaking, which used to be 2 minutes, now it's 3 minutes. In the end of the day, you know, we're a board that represents the school district. You know, it's a very, it's tough times we're in right now. Talking about education, talking about Black Lives Matter, talking about sports. And in my opinion, I'm only one member of this board, the 3 minutes is more, in my opinion, a guideline than a cut and dry. I mean, if somebody's, you know, talking in circles and beating a dead horse and this and that, that's one thing. But I think telling the public they can't speak and finish their thought is a slippery slope to make. And that's my opinion. So.
Do you have a suggestion on which of those four? Because that's what I'm going to be asking when you do.
Come back to me.
Okay.
Thanks, sorry.
Bruce, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I was just saying, I remember the complaint from 4 weeks ago, and it was more than just turning the back. It was the confrontation that you stood up and wanted to end the meeting. And we have our rules that we don't engage with the person speaking prior to a meeting. And then it goes back to the flag. I wasn't even on the board then, and I read about it and the emails that went out. So it's not just turning your back on someone. I thought that would have been nothing. I mean, it would have been disrespectful, but that wouldn't have been anything major. And I think a censure is in order. Censure does nothing but say, we are not happy with what you're doing as a board member, with your behavior as a board member. Doesn't mean you get fined, doesn't mean you get kicked off. It just means watch out.
Are there any other comments?
I have just one. I think I think a lot more respect needs to be given to our chair in letting her run the meeting. And that's something I will say. Time-wise, that's the chair's first decision as to when someone needs to stop talking or not, when the community has the option to talk or be brought up, that again is on the chair. So mine in general is that I ask the community and ask the board to please respect that a lot more. As for the 4 things that are in here, I guess I will follow Doug and say that the community needs to make the decision more so than this board. So I would follow the recommendation of a take no action for that reason.
We've had 2 two suggestions of how to judge this. There's not a specific procedure listed in our policy on how to take this action. I think that it would be reasonable to have those two choices and go around the table, I guess, and have people vote. And the two options are take no action and assent.
Are you looking for motions or are you just looking for?
Well, I mean, it's an informal hearing, so I don't think there's really motions to be made. I mean, I think it's a, you know, a sort of a quasi-judicial informal hearing.
Can I make a comment before you do that?
You may actually absolutely do that.
So I do not necessarily agree with this term for chair, but I also kind of, and I'm not gonna say I necessarily agree with it. I do not agree with turning a chair because the public does come out and the public does have to speak to us, but the public also needs to respect us a little bit too. And that goes to the lashing out part at one board meeting, but Liz was getting disrespected, and any of us would have been getting disrespected at that point in time too. And it would be from anybody. If anybody was standing for public comment and then was disrespecting any board member. I think Liz could have taken another avenue on it. I also think that it could have been handled a lot differently, being that it was public comment and it could have been handled differently. I also think that our time frame of, 2 minutes to now 3 minutes, that was a really rough meeting anyway, but it should have been upheld to the 3 minutes, so
We saved yourselves.
I understand why Liz turned her chair. But as it has been stated, we are elected officials here. Our towns will decide who they want in their positions and who they do not want in the positions. We have all been elected here by our towns to be in our positions. So I'm going with to do nothing right now.
Okay, I'm going to ask for a vote from everybody. Thank you for your statement. Are there other comments, or are we ready to vote? Matt, you have two choices: take no action, censure, or I guess not voting. And you can abstain.
You know, I'm just gonna say one more thing. I've been on this board since March. And this is the fourth public complaint that's been filed against us. And whether we vote to censure or we don't vote to censure, in the end of the day, nothing changes except the way the public views us. And I think that nothing's going to change no matter what we do. I mean, we voted to censure the board chair. And, you know, I mean, it was just a decision that was made. And the next meeting, it was like nothing had ever happened. And I think we all need to look in the mirror and realize that we're elected officials, we're in the public eye, and we just need to do a better job of making ourselves fit the part better. I mean, I made a stupid comment at a board meeting, and I'll bring it up. I made a stupid comment about the police not showing up to arrest us if we broke the law. That was a stupid comment to make. And I made a lot of people that work in this district very uncomfortable with that comment. I'm embarrassed I made it. I am. And I'm glad I got called out for it. We all need to just do a better job. I'm not gonna vote.
Liz, you vote?
Well, I'm gonna recuse myself.
Okay, abstain.
Yeah.
Thank you. Andrea?
I'm gonna abstain. I'm changing. I'm abstaining.
Okay. Jay?
Because I think as a board, we have an obligation to give a decision whether we like it or not. I'm going to stick with my take no action I like Doug's thing saying that I think at this point it is a voter decision and a board decision.
I will also vote for no action. I believe that the voters are willing for a board vote.
I concur with the previous one.
Okay. Bruce?
I think it's, you're shirking your responsibility as board members to sit there, easy cop out, to sit there and say, well, let the citizens decide. And yet we're told, when we had a board member step down, that we have to suck it up and we have to make these decisions. That's why you were elected. And so now we're elected, and a censure is nothing other than just this topic. It's gone on too long. And it's going to continue to go. It's going to be hard to censure anybody on this board for anything. We'll just say that the citizens decide this, and that would be fine. But I'm still voting censure.
He's still voting to censure.
We are not taking action. Thank you. Okay. PSBA update. I put that on the agenda. There's a regional meeting for the PSBA. They do it annually. One of the things that happens is that we, in our region, elect board members to the PSBA board. The meeting is on September 23rd. It's going to be by Zoom at 6 p.m. I would hope that everybody will try and attend if they can. The PSBA is a pretty valuable organization. I know at the regional meeting, they're going to be discussing a number of different, the COVID situation, the masking situation, the health insurance negotiations that are going on, some suggestions on where boards might find, I guess, more information and maybe some strategies for upcoming negotiations with teachers and support staff and administrators. So I would certainly love it if our board had more than me going. I am on the BSBA board. I'm one of the regional reps. And I know my position, I have another year and then I'll be back up, but there is, I'm not sure if the other member, it's a gentleman called George Founder from, I think he's Bennington Rutland, but I'm not absolutely positive. And I'm not sure if he's running again. But the regional meetings are very interesting, and would like people to go. So September 23rd, 6 p.m. You just sign up to go on the PSBA website and it's time to sign up. That was all I have to say on that, unless anybody has any questions.
So, I'm sorry, 6 p.m. sign up on the PSBA website?
Yeah, on their website. You have most likely received emails and discarded them and not looked at them. I guess it doesn't seem to ring a bell. So, okay, we are on to transact other legal business, and I don't know if anyone has anything to bring up there. I do not. Okay. We have agenda building. Are there things that people specifically want? I would like to do a report on the flag raising, please. Actually, we do have another transact other legal business. We do need to discuss whether or not we will have people for the next meeting. At least two of us are not here on the 15th. I don't know what other people's schedules are like, whether we want to try and delay the meeting or find somebody else to chair.
Well, who's not going to be here? Meeting
so far?
Matt.
And Matt. And Maria.
the 17th on here.
Oh, you will? Okay. So I don't believe Maria's back. We're coming to meetings. Yeah. That was the 18th.
Yep. Sure.
Been waiting. This isn't school stuff. This is in school, but it's not school.
I just want to leave for an important thing, let's pick up.
Okay, we'll hold on.
I can make the meeting, that's it.
Okay, thank you. So I guess that we'll just stop the meeting, we'll just go on, and that's not a big issue then. But, so for agenda building, does anyone have anything else? I mean, as I said, I would look at it.
Yep. I have two things. I'd like to remind you that on August 4th, I wanted to hear the scores for Star 360 for last year, fall and spring. And you said you did it in this month's agenda.
And then I also remember saying to you that we were going to have a report at the retreat, which was getting delayed. But if you'd like it at a board meeting, it'll be a retreat, but that's okay.
Well, I'm sorry.
I said, after you had made that request, I had a quick discussion with you that we were planning on addressing all of those things at the board retreat, which has been delayed a number of times, which is why we haven't heard all those
I'd like
results.
to do it.
Okay, that's fine, I'm just clarifying that it wasn't ignored, it was.
Bruce, those scores have been shared. You received the full goals presentation in preparation for the application was canceled. So if you need me to reshare that, let me know that you have this.
Well, I just wanted to talk about it.
Gotcha.
You know, not share by email, but discuss what's going on and have them explain it. And the second thing, I would like to see, it was easy to do an ad hoc committee on a display tonight. I'd like to do an ad hoc committee, formally talk about it, about why people are leaving, what do we need to do to get people in this school, to get the spirit back up in this school. If they're leaving for educational reasons, if they're leaving just because they got jobs somewhere else, it has nothing to do with school. If they're leaving for teachers, I just want to know why they're leaving. Are they leaving because they don't have good sports? And I've got community members who are more than willing to sit on that committee because they are very concerned about it.
Okay, we'll put it on the agenda. Does anybody else have anything?
If we do decide to make a committee under Bruce's recommendation, I'd be more than happy to sit on it with him.
You chair?
No, I won't be chair on this one.
I will also.
Okay, we're not setting it up.
I know, but.
So,
Because
remember,
I
you're
just set it up now? Why not?
All right. Okay, does anybody else have anything?
should get something to talk about education.
Okay. We do have an executive session that we will need to have, and you can give the reasons.
Yeah, so we essentially need two actions to go into executive session. The topic is labor agreements related to COVID. So first we need a finding that premature public knowledge we took the board at substantial disadvantage, and then after that finding, we need a motion to go into executive session to discuss that topic.
I would look for a motion for the first, that it was
So
at a
moved.
disadvantage. Thank you, and you seconded. Sam seconded. Do we have any other comment on that? Okay, all in favor of going into, well, we're not going into executive session in this vote, but the reason for executive session being the premature public knowledge to our disadvantage. All in favor?
Aye.
Is that everybody? Okay, I saw you good. And now could I have a motion to actually go into executive session? Thank you. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Your comment, Joe?
Yeah. Okay.
Before you
I was trying to do it, but every once in a while I catch, wow, go, I have it.
Instructions here.
Yes. About as well as it is about Android.
We are back in session, and I'm looking for a motion to address
I'll make a
what we
motion.
discussed.
I'll make a motion to authorize superintendent to enter into negotiations for a side agreement related to COVID work conditions.
Can I clarify, are we entering into the side agreement with both the support staff and the teachers?
Yes.
Okay, we need to say that.
That's good enough, yeah, so,
I
the full
authorize-
Mill River Unified Education Association.
Okay, I authorize the superintendent enter into negotiations for a side agreement for COVID work relations additions to the full
MRUEA.
MRUEA.
So both support staff and teachers. Okay, is there a second? Okay, is there further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. We don't have anything else on the agenda other than adjourn. We would like to do
Do you
that.
have to set a chairperson for when you're out on the 15th?
I have to get a hold of Maria and see if she's gonna actually, she's the vice chair, so it wouldn't normally just go to her straight and then that way, look down the chain again, so to speak. Okay, consensus on adjournment? Cool.
Yes.
We're done. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.